everybody, Spencer Hound here before the episode starts. I just want to say that this month on Constructor Criticism, if you go to the homepage, constructorcriticism.com, and you click on the donate button for PayPal, all of those donations will be going towards the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance. This is something that's really close to me. I did a episode, The Hive Mind, recently, and I just wanted to do something to give back to the community of people that deal with things close to my heart. And it's something that I struggle with daily, bipolar depression and bipolar disorder specifically. And I want to do something that I can. So if you donate this month, throughout the month of September, 100% of those donations will go towards this charity. So thank you everybody so much. Enjoy this week's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Constructive Criticism. I'm your host, Spencer, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Silver Pro, Michael Hinderrocker.
What's up?
And Bronze Pro, about to top 8 at Grand Prix. Top 8, I said, Matthew Kling.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
That would be so bad. Why would you wish that upon us, Matt?
I didn't wish that upon us. You did that.
How's it going, guys? I am so tired after the last, 40 minutes. Nothing?
Oh, it's going good. Going good.
All right.
I'm not as tired. I didn't have to do anything. I was just going
Yeah, I
fishing
mean, mostly it
and
was just us sitting here, so. No.
Yeah, well, I had to figure out what was wrong with this computer, which seems to be happening a lot lately, and it's not my favorite. So, what doesn't have a lot of things wrong with those are sponsored Oasis games. You can check them out at mtgoasis.com. You can get 15% off of your first order by using the code CCMTG at checkout. You can get 4% off of every order by using the code Would That Be Good. We really appreciate Oasis. They do a ton for us. They'll be loaning us our decks for this Grand Prix coming up. And if you want to support us, go tell them by using the codes at checkout. Leave them a little comment, let them know how much you like Michael or Matt or Austin, just the people that work there. Just say, Spencer said to say something nice about Austin. Just go do it. Go do it. It'll make his day. So you can check out our other sponsor at InGaming. You can use the code CCMTG10 at checkout to get a percentage back. They also give us a kickback. So check them out at InGaming for your sleeves, your playmats, stuff like that. Hopefully, when Spencer is not an idiot, he'll go ahead and set up store there so you can get sleeves and playmats from us from there. So today is our mailbag episode from our patrons. So if you go to patreon.com/ccmtg, you can become a patron of the show starting at $1 or more per month. Anything that you donate is super appreciated. It really, really means the world to us. So check that out, and you'll get to ask questions on episodes like this for the mailbag. So let's get right into it, though. So before we get into our mailbag episode, hashtag always improving is the point of the show. We believe if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And we want to be doing what we can all the time to improve ourselves. So, Michael, why don't we start with you? What have you done this week to improve at Magic the Gathering?
Well, I played a lot of Modern with a lot of different decks to try to figure out, again, just team configurations. And it was kind of a good time. I think that trying to think about different things that are available to you sometimes will actually help you during an event, just because I have probably seen, I feel like I've played against most anything you can think of. So I feel prepared.
Yeah,
Maybe not, I might not have played every matchup you can think of, but I've probably played against every deck you can think of.
I played against the Grixis Tezzeret deck during the PTQ this weekend. So I mean, that's as weird as it gets, right?
Not even
Certainly up there.
close.
Not even close, Michael says. What's the weirdest deck that you've played against, and what do you think of the format right now?
I played against a bunch of just actually strange things. Like probably not worth mentioning kind of strange things.
Oh, okay.
Like not good strange things.
All right.
But you know, at least the Tezzeret deck looks like it could sometimes win games of Magic. I think
Oh.
the format's okay right now.
I don't even know that he had Tezzerets in the main in game 1. I actually don't know how that deck wins a game 1, other than your opponent conceding to Crucible Worlds.
I mean,
Presumably
Academy
it has
Runes
a
is how
way
you
to-
win.
With Pirate Spellbomb, right?
Well, or just, them running out of cards in their deck.
Oh.
You only really need the Pirate Spellbomb if they have an Emrakul.
Sure. Yeah. But just playing a lot, I feel like Modern's in an okay place. I certainly enjoy the messing around with decks part of Modern. I appreciate that there's a lot of variety in what you both can play and play against.
Sure.
It's certainly amusing.
Matt, what about you? What have you done to improve at Magic the Gathering this week?
Well, similar to Michael, I basically played every single Modern deck, and they're all terrible, so that's good. No, I mostly came to the conclusion that Hollow One's not at a good place in the metagame right now, which is really hard for me to do. So that was a
I'm proud
step
of
forward
you.
for me.
Good job.
Yeah. That being said, I did go 2-3 in my league against 5 good matchups. So, or matchups that I would have considered good prior.
So it took a lot to realize it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Sure.
But yeah, mostly just that. I mean, we had the PTQ this weekend, which I flamed out of as well. So if nothing else, my character has grown this weekend by having to figure out how to lose 40 matches of Magic in a row.
I also have done a lot of losing. I started out 4-0 at the PTQ on Saturday, but that was right after 3-2-1-4 with Infect before switching to Blue White, and then with Blue White I just had a 1-3 league today. So I've been doing a lot of losing myself, Matt. And you know something? I talked about this last week with Michael, but I actually losing isn't bugging me right now in Magic. It really doesn't bug me in Modern anymore because, like, what are you gonna do? Like, it's not like I can play a deck that has amazing matchups, and I don't know. It just doesn't bug me anymore.
Well, I would say that you used to be able to get by your Modern opponents just being mostly awful, but as of late, I think that all the awful players have gone to Arena, so the average quality of Magic Online player has gone up significantly.
All right, there we go. Shots fired. Yeah. So for me, I this week
So for what it's worth, I'm not saying that if you play Arena you're awful, but I'm saying if you're awful you play Arena.
Okay. The words of Matt Kling are not endorsed by constructive criticism. Honestly, this week has been really interesting for me as far as Magic is concerned. It feels like I'm trying really hard not to give, not get in the way of you two and picking our decks. And I'm just trying to master what's in front of me, and it feels like you guys are going like crazy trying to figure out what to play. So for me, it's been different. Just looked at 32 Infect lists, and then looked at 32 Blue-White lists, and then Michael sent me this write-up of Blue-White today, and so I'll be reading that after the podcast. So I don't know. I'm just chilling.
It's nice though. It's nice to know it's easier to figure out what you like within an archetype sometimes than to figure out what archetypes you like.
Yeah, I agree. I would much prefer to be in your shoes, honestly. I know Michael and I always get the pregame panic where we're just have to try 50 different decks for the week before.
Yeah, but you guys would do that even if all 3 decks were picked. You guys would still be like, "We got an audible, guys. We got an audible to these 3."
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's a problem though. It's like a disease, really.
It's great. It's been making me a lot of money.
Well,
Michael sucked all my luck through the computer.
Is that what happened? So
Yeah.
So this week I've just kind of been focusing. I actually learned a lot about Infect this week, to be fair, and I actually plan to continue to try that deck out. I think it might be in a better position than I thought it was. That being said, it sounds like Matt had a rough time with it, so maybe it's terrible, and I won 4 to league with it because it's bad.
It definitely has its matchups. man, the matchups you can't lose and the hands you can't lose with, if you're just like, if you're doing it, I don't think there's anything that's close.
For what it's worth, I actually didn't have that little success with Infect. Like I 5-0'd a league, started out 3-0 in the next one, ended up finishing 3-2, which was, a letdown for sure. And then I went 1-2 in the challenge, and that's the extent of the Infect that I played.
Oh, okay.
Sure. But like 9-4 is totally fine, right?
Yeah, it wasn't like I had a bad record or anything with it.
Well, you made me feel like you did.
Infect just feels like that though. Like the problem, my problem with Infect is that I feel like a lot of decks that are really fast work like this, and I know that it's like a mental block that I have, but when you like win a game with Infect, most of your wins are like Blighted Agent, kill you. And when you lose a game with Infect, it's mostly like a long, grindy, drawn-out affair where you.
Oh man, that's not my experience at all. Most of the games I lost with Infect are no creatures mulligan, no creatures mulligan, no creatures concede.
So that's okay, but
Interesting.
that is the same. That's the same as a really fast win. So those games don't
Sure.
feel like anything, and you win
Sure.
more often than you lose like that for sure. So what I would say is those games mostly feel like the 0-time games mostly feel fine. You're
Sure.
like winning, but any game that goes long, you're just like pretty unlikely to win because your deck is all pump spells and 1/1s.
Right.
So my experience with Infect is that it always feels worse than it is because I keep losing. I feel like the majority of the time I spend playing is involved in these long, grindy games and the majority of the time that I spend winning is like, a 10-minute segment of, Noble Hierarch, Blighted Agent, save it, kill you.
Yeah. Well, let's move on from Infect, and let's talk about our power rankings this week on the show. Or no power rankings. Oh my gosh, I'm like, guys, I'm beat. let's talk about our deck of the week. So there's no power rankings this week. The GP this weekend is Team Unified Modern, and I guess we could just start by saying what is our current lineup. Anyone know?
No idea. I think currently what we mostly have, and this is just my opinion. I mean, Michael might have different ideas about what we have, but we have you on blue white, we have Michael on humans, and then we have me on whatever else fits.
Michael?
Yeah, sure. That sounds believable. That's kind of about where we're at. Like, I think humans is pretty good, and I think I am pretty good with. I think it's been so good for so long that my inclination is to think it's worse than it is, because when a deck is the best deck for, months to a year at a time, you start just kind of trying to poke holes in it. But
Sure.
It's kind of like, the red black or whatever of Modern. It's just like,
Right.
you can play other things, they're just worse.
Right. What decks do you think fit into that slot right now, Matt? I think Tron fits into that slot. I think Jund sounds like it fits into that slot.
Sure. I mean, there are many archetypes that fit into that slot. I mean, it could be KCI, it could be Hardened Scales Affinity, it could be basically any Mox Opal deck, any Ancient Stirrings deck.
I didn't even get to my most spicy list by so much.
Sure. We have a burn deck with some Mishra's Baubles.
I've seen
Grixis Death Shadow.
Grixis Death Shadow fits in there, yeah.
Jund.
Yeah, so like it just
Mardu.
can't play kind of things out, basically.
Just
All
like
right.
actually every deck fits in there.
All right. Well, now we know, and knowing is half the battle. So, with that being said, let's
Somehow
go on to our.
Ad Nauseam does not.
I feel like in this case, knowing potentially less than half the battle.
I mean, if Matt just knew what he would play at the GP, we could just start practicing, Matt. Gosh.
We're already
This league with
practicing.
Jund is going pretty well so far.
All right.
It's speculative practicing. It's fine.
So let's talk about the deck of the week. So this week I want to talk about the Vengevine decks in Modern. A lot of people in our testing group played some Vengevine at the PTQ this weekend to some poor results. But Matt Kling was telling everybody that the deck was broken going into the PTQ. So let's talk about that deck first, and then let's talk about other Vengevine decks after. Matt, why don't you tell us about your broken Vengevine?
Sure. Do you want me to start off on it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the deck that we ended up playing at the PTQ was basically it was more or less the Black Red Vengevine deck, but then splashing blue for Hedron Crab into a lesser extent Prized Amalgam.
Mhm.
And the deck was very good for what it's worth. But I did figure out what the problem is with it. It's if your opponent's game plan is proactively more powerful than yours, you just can't win. Like if you're forced to be the one to interact, you just lose the match.
Sure.
And that doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. Like if say you're playing against, I mean, if you're playing against anything that's even like a turn slower than you, basically can never lose. But yeah, if you're playing against something like Storm or in my unfortunate case Cheerios,
Twice.
then you just yeah, I played against Cheerios twice
Twice in 3 rounds.
in 3 matches. Yeah. So anyway, you just can't win those kind of matchups.
So, one of my questions would be, was the Hedron Crab worth it, and how much better was it than the Goblin Bushwhacker?
Well, having played a little bit more against the Black Red Vengevine deck, I would say that Goblin Bushwhacker is really nice in the postboard games to help you actually win games if you don't have an answer to Leyline. It's actually surprising how often you can just like play a 1/1 for 1 and then another 1/1 for 1 and then like a 1/1 for 2 and then play a Bushwhacker and like it just kills your opponent.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in hands where they ended up with like 2 Leyline of the Voids or just mulligan to 5 looking for Leyline, things like that.
Sure. So would you
So
say the Blow Splash is not worth
my,
it?
my conclusion on this is that if people are less prepared for the deck, then the Blue Splash is going to definitely be worth it because it is just objectively more powerful that way.
Right.
Like the Hedron Crabs don't do anything, or the Goblin Bushwhackers don't do anything if your opponent has or doesn't have a ley line in play for the most part.
Right.
I mean, they certainly can hasten your clock by a turn, but like not often enough to be meaningful. So I would rather have the consistency of Hedron Crab.
Okay.
But if you're expecting to play against Leyline and you still want to play this deck for whatever reason, then I would probably play the Bushwhackers.
Michael, what do you think about Vengevine decks right now?
They seem decent. Like, I don't actually really think Leyline is that big a problem. Our idea was basically to try to make game 1 as favorable as possible, because it's just really unlikely for your opponent to actually draw a Leyline in a functional hand twice. That was certainly my experience. I don't think I have basically lost a Leyline at all.
How are you beating it? And
Rest in Peace. Rest in Peace is just actually too slow. You usually beat Leyline either by killing it or just by playing creatures and your opponent mulliganed too aggressively for it.
Okay.
They just like Leyline on a like I've had multiple opponents with like double Leylines on a 7 where they then went like Fetch Shock Thoughtseize and
Sure.
took, I think we were playing Wismare. So they like took something like that. And it's like, well, so, my graveyard doesn't work, but in this last version, we were playing like Bloodghasts and Prized Amalgams and, Walking Ballistas and Gravecrawler attack. Like, it's fine if your opponent actually ends up on like a mold of 4 effectively, especially like mold of 5 for a Leyline. You just don't have to have a very good hand to beat that a lot of the time.
That makes sense.
So I didn't think Leyline was a big problem. Like Matt was saying, I think the bigger issue is just that you're sort of linear to a fault.
Right.
It's like playing Mega Dredge, right? It's like you're a lot better at. You're a lot less soft to Thoughtseize. So if Thoughtseize decks became really popular again, I think the deck would be super sweet. Because you just have a way higher density of effects that are sort of creating the same net effect. Whereas like in Dredge, often getting your or Cathartic Thoughtseize would be the end of the game.
Sure.
You also can beat a Leyline, where Dredge can't really ever beat a Leyline. You can get under Rest in Peace, which Dredge can't really do. And the downside is that, like, you just don't interact well. You will lose games to, like, Inkmoth Nexus is a big problem.
Right.
That's probably the biggest problem card.
Sure.
So
just flying creatures in general, I was finding were difficult. Like your opponent had
but Nexus
if
especially,
you found yourself in any
tank.
kind of a racing situation. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we talked about as much as we could about this deck. One thing that was actually one of the questions. So I think that the thing that we need to think about here is like we mentioned some key cards, right? Goblin Bushwhacker, different ways that you can play the deck. How are you killing uh, the ley line, Michael? You mentioned that, but didn't really say how.
Uh, we were trying Wispmare. You could try like Destructive Revelry. You could try mostly ignoring it. I think that's what the actual black-red decks are doing. I don't think they're playing any answers to Leyline in the 75 usually.
Sure. All right.
Um,
Well, that is it for deck of the week. Let's go on to the mailbag this week. So the first question that we have is, what are your current? Oh, by the way, thank you to our patrons for sending these in. I posted a like last chance for questions last week, and we got multiple questions. I was like, oh, should I just do this every week? And they're like, yes, just post before the episode, and we will respond here. It's a little unfair to those who aren't in the critics group. So if you want to be a part of the critics group, you just become a patron of $5 or more per month, and you can ask questions there. We also let them submit deck doctors, the new set's coming out. So if you want us to take a look at your deck and talk about it on the podcast, that's a great way to do that. With that being said, let's get right into the questions this week. The first question is, what are your current goals in Magic, and how do you plan to achieve them? Matt?
Well, my current goal is to be the best there ever was.
All right.
So
And
there are a
how
lot
do
of
you
steps
plan
between
on
now and there.
doing that?
I don't. I plan on just failing. No, my actual goal currently would be to get silver this year, and the best way for me to do that is probably to qualify for the last Pro Tour of the year. It was going to be one of the next 2 Pro Tours, but we had a failure at the RPTQ, so
Sure.
pretty much going to need a top 4 GP or something.
Well, I'll do my best to help you out with that one, Matt. So, Michael, what about you? What is your current goal in Magic, and what are your current steps that you're trying to take to achieve it?
well, my most immediate goal would be to feel like at the end of this Grand Prix, like I did my part to give us the best chance I could. And I plan on achieving that in a very concrete way, which is,
Sucking
grinding
it up
away
and
this
playing
week and
humans?
figuring out what they should be. Yeah, I mean, I like humans fine.
I'm just kidding. That was a joke.
But,
That was a bad joke.
But I think that what I would say, like in general, for me, what typically works best as far as achieving Magic-related goals is just making them simple and things I can control. Like, it would be nice to, do well enough to get gold, but you don't. I want to get gold and then get gold, right? Or I want to get silver and then get silver. It's like, how do you take
Right.
small direct steps?
It can't just be like it can't be like I would like to get 8 pro points next weekend. Let's do it. Like that's not realistic. It has to be like I would like to do well enough to put myself in a chance to win. Give myself a chance to win. Here are the things that I need to do to complete that. You mentioned grinding.
I would like to.
You are not grinding to like practice, right? You're grinding to find viability, and there's a big difference there. Will you talk about that for a second?
I think this is just true in general. I think when you get past the stage where like a major part of your problems are going to be sideboarding and like sequencing errors, you're just better off trying to learn about matchups and learn about different decks and what exists and what your options are than you are just playing the same matchup over and over and over again, especially versus like random competition like on Magic Online. My experience has been that if I spend a lot of time tuning a deck list, I will find a good win rate with just about anything. So it's more about looking for something that feels good and trying to sort of lock in on that rather than like, oh, I 5-0'd with this, it must be great.
Yeah, this is something I talked to Alex sitting here about a lot a couple weeks ago. It was like, man, the number of people who are like, I 5-0'd this league, I can't believe I did poorly at this next tournament. It's like, wait, did you just 5-0 a league and then not play another match of Magic? Did you 5-0 the league and literally not think about it again before the tournament? Like, did you think that that was going to be a direct correlation? Because, I think that often our brains want us to not solve a problem that's in front of us, and if they think if our brain thinks it's found a solution, it will just end the conversation. It'll just be like, oh, done. Okay, we're good. Because problem solving is hard, and it's part of our job to kind of overcome that. Um, so my goal this week is I have two goals in Magic, by the way. I have my long-term goal, and I have, um, my goal for right now. So my long-term goal is to get to vote in the Pro Tour Hall of Fame. That's like that is my what I want my my end goal in Magic to be. I don't ever plan on being a professional Magic player. I don't ever plan on going to the Pro Tour Hall of Fame. But I would like to have a vote one day. So that's kind of my goal right now is to just, uh, you know, e- every chance I get to play for a pro point, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to play my best, and I'm going to try and get as many pro points as I can so that one day I get that vote. Um, the on top of that, you have micro goals, and right now my goal is to understand blue white control in a way that if that is a deck that we play at this Grand Prix, that I can pilot it to the point where I feel comfortable. I understand the matchups. I understand my deck, and I understand my sideboard and things like that. So there's kind of a lot of little goals in that. You'll notice that I didn't just say I'm going to be good with blue white control. I actually have very specific things I want to do. I want to understand my deck list. I want to understand my sideboard. I want to understand like what a matchup is about going into a given matchup if I can, and I think that if I do all those things, it will add up to a good record. The next question that we have is a follow up. How do you align those goals with goals outside of Magic? So, Matt, I have a condescending question. Do you have goals outside of Magic?
Well, off and on. It depends.
Okay.
Not often. No.
Okay. Do you right now?
No, I do not right now.
Okay.
Well, mostly what happened, like I think I've talked about this on the podcast before. I had planned to go back to school. The problem that I have is that I don't know what I want to do, right? Which is like a struggle. I get
Sure.
that, like, I'm not the only one that struggles with that, but I really can't see myself just doing something for money,
Right.
So anyway, so I was going to go back to school and just kind of, put out feelers, I guess. And then I top aided a GP, and I was like, well, I guess I'll put that off for, 12 months and see where this goes.
Sure. Uh, by the way, I didn't know how to say it not condescendingly. Not that I am condescending towards you. I just didn't know how else to ask that question.
Sure. I mean, it didn't sound condescending the way that you asked it. So.
Okay. Good. Good. Um, do you so one of the things that I actually really admire about you, Matt, is that when you become invested in something, you learn everything you can about it. And I actually think that would be kind of exhausting when it comes to schooling. Is that something that you find would be hard for you at school? Like that when you picked something, you would be so ingrained in it, and like things like that, things like academia can be so deep that it would get tiring.
I mean, I haven't experienced that in the past, but I, haven't pursued any higher education at this point, so everything I've done was very easy.
Sure. Okay.
So it's hard to say. I haven't found myself in that situation. I will let you know when it comes up.
Michael, do you have goals outside of Magic that Magic kind of feeds into, and the way that you're doing things in Magic feed into your goals outside?
Yeah, I would say that just like process improvement, and I think more than anything, Magic does teach you some sort of discipline. Like, I think to consistently do well playing Magic, you just need to focus and continue working on the things that you need to, and they exist. And I think that like practicing those habits outside of Magic can kind of sort of cyclically help you get better at Magic and vice versa.
So as many people know, I work a full time job in software. I'm a associate product manager, and I had a goal of becoming a product manager before I was in my job for 2 years, like a full fledged product manager. And so the way that my work does things, in November they will discuss raises and title changes and things of that nature. So I will know in November if I am going to be promoted / have that title change, and it sounds like I am. And a lot of that has to do with the things that I preach on this podcast and the way that I go about my life. Um, I think that a lot of the things that we teach here can be applied directly into the workplace or school. You know, when Michael and I are talking about how to solve a problem of a given matchup or a given, I mean, just any issue that you can run into Magic, and when you apply the things that we talk about outside of Magic, it actually does work. My entire job is problem solving. I talk to 30 people, or 10 to 15, 30 people, somewhere in there. It's kind of a big range, but I figure out they'll tell me what their problems are, but rather than just like listening to them and be like, okay, here's the problem, I go a level deeper and I'm like, this is actually the underlying problem that you're all sharing that you don't realize. Let's solve that problem and it will trickle down and solve the other problems. And this is something that happens in Magic quite a bit, where we'll be like this matchup is bad, and like that's all somebody will say, but it's like, well, why is it bad? And this is something that Matt talked about 2 weeks ago on the podcast, where the difference in card selection can really change those type of things, and a lot of people kind of just give up before trying something new and trying to solve the underlying problem. So I would say that I'm constantly trying to do this, like in my day to day due to work. Also, parenthood is impossible, so I'm trying to figure out how to do that, and that's a different set of goals. Cool. Let's go on to the next question. How do you win in Modern? To me, it seems very random and hard to gain an edge. Matt, why don't you go first? How are we going to win this Grand Prix?
Well, Modern is kind of tough that way, right? Like, you are going to end up with a lot of 80-20, 20-80 matchups, and it's really hard to metagame in Modern because people are going to play what they're going to play, oftentimes. I think that the best way to win in Modern is to... Honestly, for me at least, the best way that I perform in Modern is to play something that I like. Like, if I'm enjoying what I'm doing, I'm usually going to play a lot better. And I think that that's the key to Modern, really, is just being able to play at your highest level.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with this. I typically find that people say, like, knowing your deck is the edge you get in Modern, and I think that's a lie. I actually don't think that's what's happening. I think is that people who know their decks often love what they're doing, and they're having fun, and often the person that's having more fun wins at Magic. Get the underlying thing. But I actually agree with Matt. I think that uh, like so the last PPTQ, for example, like I didn't want to be there. I was playing a deck that I know very well, and it didn't matter. I just lost. I lost two good matchups, and I just played very badly. And it was like, I don't even know why I'm here, and it is important to just kind of enjoy yourself in this format, because there's a lot of up and downs in it, and that's just going to lead to a lot of frustrations. And if you go in frustrated, you're just going to play badly.
Well, and the other thing about that is, consciously or unconsciously, if you hit a bad matchup with a deck that you don't like, you're going to be thinking, oh, why did I even do this today? And then you're not going to be thinking about, how am I going to win this match of Magic?
Right. I agree. Michael?
I think that's true. Additionally, I would say just play more powerful decks. It doesn't matter how much you love Kiki Chord, it's bad. So,
Fair enough.
Sure, there are obviously exceptions to love your deck. Like, love your deck within reason, right? Like, I am not going to play Hollow One because I don't think it's very good right now, even though I do love that deck.
But think about how highest standard that is, right? Hollow One is not even like, it's not like Hollow One is a trash deck. Thing is, I'm going to pick the deck I think is best positioned that I also don't hate.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I would say.
Yeah. The next thing that we have is, what do you want to see in Guilds at Ravnica? Matt?
I have no idea, honestly. I never really give much thought to what things that I hope they print, or I mean, honestly, at this point, I basically don't even look at spoilers until the whole set's spoiled.
Yeah, I'm pretty close to that too.
I have an answer.
Yeah.
But it's like not a it's not a real answer. Just modal spells. That's what I always hope they print.
Modal spells are great. I mean, like,
always modal spells.
Basically, I hope that they print Farseek and Ranger's Guile in this set, and yeah, I'll be happy.
I wish that they would give us a better 2-mana counterspell instead of.
What did you say,
instead
Michael?
of upgrading the cancel.
I said you want Abzan Charm, you just don't know it yet.
I don't want Abzan. I want Farseek.
You
and
always
Ranger
want
Scout is
Abzan
the one that
Charm.
gets 2 forests, right?
Abzan Charm in every format all the time.
What were you gonna say, Matt?
I was just saying that I do wish that they would eventually print a better 2-mana counterspell rather than just keep making the cancel better. Like,
I mean, yeah, I just think that miscalculation should be in standard all the time.
sure, I mean, miscalculation would be insanely powerful, but like even if we just had like mana leak or something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, like, I'm okay with that. Like,
Just bring back Logic Knot.
that's actually
Plus,
not a
sure,
bad
Logic
one.
Knot would be sweet. That would actually probably be pretty fair in standard if we don't have fetches.
Yeah, I think it would be fine even with fetches probably.
Michael Hinderocker for
Sure,
R&D,
I mean,
everyone.
like, it's not like counterspell is broken or anything, but I do think that it's. I mean, you look at the new cancel that they spoiled, right? And like it's cool, but like it's just another cancel, right?
I mean, it's significantly better than the one that people loved in Dissolve, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's better than
definitely
Dissolve.
that. It's better than that. It's better than Disallow. It's like it's a good cancel, but
Yeah.
I agree
Right.
that fundamentally cancel kind of sucks.
It might even be the best cancel ever printed, honestly, but it's still,
But what you're
Still
saying
3
is they
mana
should
counter target
cancel
spell.
cancels. No more cancels.
Yeah, I'm gonna pack the negation their cancel and then make them print a better one.
How much do you test a match before you feel good about it, or before you form an opinion on it, Matt?
Before I form an opinion on it, I mostly have opinions going into it.
Yeah, I
Zero
always
game.
have preconceived notions going into it myself.
I think it's pretty hard to avoid that. But as far as when I'm willing to actually give my opinions to other people, I usually like to play a lot more. I don't usually feel comfortable telling somebody how I feel about a matchup unless I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of it, and that can take any number of games depending on the matchup. It can take more or less, especially if the results aren't matching my preconceived notions at first, right? Like if I assume that a matchup is bad, and it's so for instance, Hollow One, I assumed would have a bad burn matchup because the original incarnations of Hollow One had like Death Shadows in them and were kind of bad, and I was losing to burn a lot. So like when I started testing the new Hollow One deck, I assumed that burn would be a bad matchup, and it probably took me winning like 10 or 11 times in a row against burn before I decided that matchup was probably Hollow One favored.
I've had that experience a lot myself, where you're just like, oh, I can't believe I'm like crushing this bad matchup so often, to the point where you're like, oh.
Right.
And in my, I've also had the flip side be a weakness of mine a lot, where it's like I'm just crushing this matchup. It's obviously good for me, even though everything is telling me that it's bad. And that's something that I tried to work on a lot. And I thought that we did a really good job of that testing for this RPTQ, where like we played, like we could play two to 5 games and like talk about it and both come to the conclusion, even though the one deck won most of the games, is very clearly in the other deck's favor. And
Right.
Most of the time you play 5 games, you just you know deep down in your heart which side you want to be on.
Yeah.
Right?
And
like,
I think that the truth is that we don't trust ourselves enough in those situations, or we trust ourselves too much, depending on who you are. But I think that at some point you've played enough Magic where your brain, it does a good job of analyzing like what situations are going to look like throughout a game, throughout a given match, and just plugging them in for you. And then unless something is happening in your testing to say, oh, I'm actually wrong, that's actually not how this plays out. So a really good example of this is like Search for Azcanta was like the best top deck in blue-white control in Modern. It's like by a significant margin. You just basically, if you've gone to the long game, you would rather draw that card than any of the other cards in your deck, because it just instantly flips and you like win. And in my head, I would just think that I want it early to just start going through my deck. But the thing is, you go through your deck so quickly that it's you'd actually rather draw it late than early, and that's just counterintuitive to what I would think.
Yeah, I think usually once you've played a matchup a few times, like, I mean, what I would say is that trying to make up percentages is mostly nonsense, and you should just figure out if it's a matchup you'd like to play against or not.
Right.
And But trying to say, oh, this is 80-20 and this is 70-30 and this is 60-40, like, you can't really play enough games to get that kind of a data set.
Hey, I can promise you, without a shadow of a doubt, that Grixis Death Shadow is more than 70% a favorite against Blue Eye Control.
Well, so honestly, I think that when people use terms like that, they're not actually using real numbers, right? They're just saying like if it's a 60-40 matchup, it's something that they consider slightly favored for that deck.
Right. That's
If
how
it's
I
a
use them.
70-30 matchup, it's like moderately favored. 80-20 is like a crushing.
Right. I think that like if you got granular enough to be like this is a 61% matchup on the play and a 73% matchup on the draw, I'd be like, yeah,
Sure.
I don't. You just don't know that. That's not something you know. But I can confidently say that I think that if we had our super duper computer and it told us, it would tell us like some of these things are true. And I think that
Right.
what we're trying to do often, Michael, is make shortcuts for this. And I think that it's become something that people just like really hate. And I think that some people do it to a fault, right? They're like, I don't know, I think this
Yeah.
matchup 60-40. And it's like, I think that what Matt is saying is more true.
Right.
I just don't think
all
it
I'm
matters,
saying
right?
is-
Like all speech is
all I'm
just
really saying is,
utilitarian.
you can't argue between like 60-40 and 55-45 and
Sure,
that kind of
sure,
stuff,
that's
right?
yeah, completely
it's
nonsense.
it's like a survey question, right? Where it's like, how do you control positive, extremely positive, negative, extremely negative, right? I mean, that's what we're actually doing. We're just calling it numbers. For some reason.
Grixis Death Shadow is extremely
Yeah, exactly. They're
negative.
just using numbers because it's
for
been,
Blue Eye
yeah.
Control.
But the secret is you're mostly just trying to think about what. I don't think you're going to be able to like map out
Yeah.
the best deck by like multiplying percentages by expected metagame, but like
Yes.
you're not like that kind of nonsense isn't going to work.
To speak to this question, though, it only took me 3 turns of playing Grixis Death Shadow versus Blue Eye to realize
Sure.
I was in for a rough time.
You're like, yeah, this is just bad for me.
I was like,
Yeah.
I can't cast.
But that's the thing.
I
right?
can't
Like,
cast
they
a spell
play
in my hand this
cards.
game.
Right. They play cards, and you're just like, oh man, I don't want to play against any of these cards, and not in this combination, right?
Right,
And,
right.
I think you said you probably had finished like one game, and you were like, man, I think this matchup sucks.
I texted you guys. I was like, I'm playing against Grixis Death Shadow. I don't think I can
which
win.
is fine, but I think that's like the takeaway from that, right? Is like you probably don't need. There are a lot of times where you don't need to play.
Right.
Right, you don't need to play 10 games. You just know.
What questions should you be asking when you're playing to learn? Michael?
Just trying to figure out what, like, why you're doing what you're doing and why your opponent's doing what they're doing. I think is probably.
I
what I would say.
streamed with Mono Red last week, and like one of the things that I focused on in the stream was actually just talking about playing like hands that had both a Bomat Courier and a the 1/2 prowess, whatever his name is. Like, and which
Soulscar Mage.
Yeah, Soulscar Mage. And which do you play first? Like, what is correct and why is it correct? And like, is there a heuristic for it, or is this like matchup dependent, or is this like? And in my head, it's the heuristic is play the other creature first and the haste creature second because it adds up to more damage in the long run. And the truth is that's not true. You actually want to play Bomat first because the card under the Bomat is worth significantly more than the damage, and because the Soulscar Mage is a significantly better late game card. And understanding why things are the way they are, rather than just accepting what people tell you and accepting like what your brain initially thinks, is far more important than like specific questions you should be asking yourself.
Yeah, I think the biggest point is just having a focus on trying to learn things while you're playing. Talked about this several times now, but I do it a lot less now. But like I used to just like go on autopilot a lot when I was playing Magic, and it wasn't as helpful as like Magic where I was specifically trying to learn something.
You guys know what the 5 whys are, right? Like when you just like when somebody presents you with a question or an answer and you ask them why 5 times, like They give you an answer. You say, well, why is that the answer? And then they answer that, and you say, well, why is that? And like you break the problem down. And I think this is something that's really hard to do for a lot of people. And like, if anybody ever does it to you, like if your spouse ever does it to you, it's like one of the most infuriating things in the world. But
Yeah. Why did I get punched in the face? Why are you still punching me in the face?
but
Why did you break my nose?
I had a boss at one of my jobs that did this, and it was super helpful for me for breaking down problems. And I think that that's something that is really what you should be doing when you're trying to learn in magic testing. Is just like somebody says this matchup is bad, and you're like, oh, why is it bad? And they say, oh, because of this. And you say, well, why is that bad for you? And then they say, because of this. And then you're saying, oh, okay, but why is that worse than X or Y? Like actually breaking something down to its granular level is going to teach you far more than just trying to get quick tips and quick fixes. So,
I actually had a fairly interesting moment that was kind of similar,
Yeah.
In a similar vein to this with Casey recently. Casey Bloodworth, former co-host of Constructive Criticism. Anyway, we were talking about the merits of Blue-White versus Jeskai and what their different matchups were. And I was explaining to him why Blue-White was better than Jeskai against Tron. And then it turns out everything I was explaining was actually not true because they have basically the exact same deck except where you replace Terminuses and Ops with like lightning bolts and lightning helixes. It was actually it was really funny. Like even the mana base, like most of the Jeskai lists now are running 3 Field of Runes. So
Yeah.
it was it was definitely one of those things where I just had like, well, I mean, I get that your mana is going to be awkward sometimes with Jeskai, but like,
because there's a
Sure.
whole other Field of Ruin and a Ghost Quarter to draw.
you're playing. Oh, sure. You're playing 4 Field of Runes and 1 Ghost Quarter, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
You're playing
Interesting.
60% of the Field of Ruins.
Sure. So that's not nothing.
Yeah, I mean, given that you almost have to draw one to win, it's
Right.
Trust me, I'm mulliganing a lot
But anyway,
of hands with 3. You have a lot of them.
That wasn't really the point. The point was that I had a bunch of ideas that for whatever reason in my head, Jeskai just seemed worse than Blue-White in that matchup, and it turned out looking at some of the lists that wasn't necessarily true.
In response to the incident in Jackson, Florida, do you think we need more security at these events? There's no security at Magic events, for what it's worth. But I would assume the convention centers have security. Maybe they don't. I have no idea. I am not qualified to answer this question.
I mean, I've been to Magic events where they were like checking bags or whatever when you walked in.
Yeah, SCG invitationals I've been to that had that.
say
I think the Pro Tour was doing that as well.
short answer, no. Long answer, I'm probably not allowed to get into.
Can you go into details about how you identify weaknesses in your game? Do you confer with others? Was it just straight introspective? If it was just an introspection, then can you get into the process for that in general? My latest one is that I'm bad with mono red in standard, and I went 0-9 in competitive tournaments with mono red, and I was like, I'm bad at this. I would like to fix it. That one's really simple. I think that pretty often we know our weaknesses and we try and mask them and hide them through other means rather than trying to fix them. And it really is as simple as just looking and be like, look, I'm bad at this. So for work these last couple weeks, I got a skills list of like skills that a product manager should have, and what a senior product manager should have, and what an associate product manager should have, and what a director of product should have, and what I can't remember really off the top of my head the one that's like a product owner, but it's better than that. Anyway, and so I filled out and I scored myself on a scale of 1 to 5 on each of these skills that a product manager should have. So yeah, I think that like if you made a list of the things that Reed Duke does that you find impressive, and then you scored yourself honestly on those, you would find weaknesses in your game. I think that is a way that you could go about it. Michael, what about you?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Or Matt, you can go.
Go ahead, Michael. Either one. I was just going to say it's actually very interesting to me. I have a lot of problems with self-evaluation, so maybe I should look into something like that.
I think that trying to just be honest with yourself, and I mean, I certainly won't say I never blame variance, but I would say that looking at what's happening, like why did I lose this game? What were and even just like what were the choices I made? What were the choices I made in deck building? What were the choices I made
Yeah.
in sideboarding? What were the choices I made in sequencing? Was there things where I either did or didn't consider different plays? And I think just being open to being wrong
Dude,
is probably the easiest way to like. I I sometimes get. I know Matt used to always give me a hard time for flip flopping my opinion on cards a lot. Like I'd be like, "Oh, I think that's bad," and then a week later, I'd be like, "I think we should try this. It sounds great." And I am very open to being wrong,
Mhm.
and I think that if you want to get better at something, being prepared to think you're kind of bad at it is a good first step.
There was a moment at the GP this weekend where Reed talked about how he got better at Magic, and one of the things he said is like he said his exact words were, "In my line of work, you do a lot of losing, and if you're not prepared to do a lot of losing, Magic is not the game for you." And I think the same thing is true about being wrong. If you are not prepared to be wrong a bunch of times and admit that you're wrong, you're not going to get better at Magic. It's just not going to happen.
This is interesting. This was not the. If you guys don't mind going into this a little bit more, I actually am curious about these answers because I mean I certainly can appreciate when I make mistakes. I mean I played Magic badly most of the time I feel,
Me too.
but that's not really like that's not really identifying a specific problem, right? Like there oftentimes I'll make bad plays in a game where I'll be like, oh, I can clearly see right after I made that play
I
that was bad,
I can go into
and I mean I can see that the overall problem is that I'm kind of stupid, but
no,
like
no, no. I think
that's
that
a really hard one to work on.
no, I think you just need to. So mono red, for example, or just aggro decks in general. I can just go into something I'm really bad at. I don't know when to attack with my creatures that are when they're tiny. I don't actually understand what they're worth and when they're worth it and when they'll be worth more later. I actually don't know. I do not possess that skill. I haven't practiced it, and I know that because the games where my hands are great and I just get to attack all the time, I win, right? The game, but like any time it gets more complicated than that, I lose. And any time where I drop a couple of extra lands, I lose. And I see other people that win with games with 6 lands in play and 8 lands in play. So I know that I'm doing something wrong, and it has to be my evaluation of cards in certain types of matchups, or at least I assume it is, and that's the thing that's the skill I try to work on, right? I I think that it's easy to like say like I drew 6 lands, so obviously I lost with mono red. But like the truth is like people win with mono red all the time. There's no way they're just not drawing 6 lands.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. And this isn't even where I'm going with it though. Like it's more how do you identify the specific problems rather, right? Like rather
Like
than saying
how did I identify that I
how do you not blame variance?
well, right, well how did I identify that I don't know what the value of a card is in a mono red deck is because I look at turn one and I don't know which creature to play.
Sure, but that's a very specific example, right? Like what's the process to finding out something like that? Like if you were trying to do a self-evaluation and try to figure out what you're going to work on,
Mm-hmm.
what's your process for trying to figure out what it is that you need to work on?
I think that what I do is when like or what I've been trying to do is like when I'm playing a game, take a note of things that I don't know what's correct. And if I don't know what's
Okay.
correct, what are the common themes in those moments, and then find out like where my weaknesses are from there.
Sure. So basically you're trying to establish a pattern with whatever your mistakes are.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a really good example
I
of
think
this is like people who like I see I have talked to people who are like I'm so unlucky like I never draw enough lands, and I'm like actually I've seen you keep like 32 one-landers like this year. Like there's no it's not that you don't draw enough lands, it's that you keep too many bad hands. Like let's work on that problem instead. And I think identifying those type of things is like I know that's like a really like simple example, but I think that's how you have to approach it.
Sure. No, I mean I think that answered the question that I was asking, which is, basically you should just look at what mistakes or what problems you're having and then identify a pattern within those problems.
Yeah, I think the same thing can be true even when applied more broadly. Like if you're maybe not understanding matchups correctly, and it's it's leading you to choose bad decks, or like if you're misreading signals in draft, or if you're overvaluing certain archetypes in draft, things like that. Just having like understanding of sort of, okay, so clearly something is going wrong in my process, but I can't figure out what it is, and then sort of trying to take a step. Okay, so am I playing bad decks because I just like them? Am I playing bad decks because I'm just choosing randomly? Like, why am I playing what I'm playing? And when I'm if I'm drafting, why do I keep ending up in for the decks that don't win? Is my seat just bad? Or am I making picks that are, cutting me off of better options early, that kind of stuff.
Any other?
But I think just being open to trying to change what you're doing.
Do you not find yourself doing this, Matt?
Well, like I said, I noticed that I make a lot of bad plays all the time, but I don't. It's hard for me to establish a pattern, right? Like if I make a play where I took too much damage off of a Goblin Chain Whirler because I forgot that my opponent had cut to ribbons in the graveyard, like that's just, it seems very isolated, right? And then again, I make another bad play for another reason at some other point, like I forgot that a certain card would be in my opponent's deck or whatever. Those problems don't seem to correlate very much, and I'm curious. I mean, it's possible I just have to have some more reflection time to consider what the patterns could be, but
Sure.
just like maybe making notes of when I'm making mistakes.
Yeah, I know this helped Quentin a lot. Like when Quentin went on his tear, when he actually, it's kind of funny to think about it. If we had the system we had now, Quentin would have like been anyway, or would have had a really good shot at silver. Anyway, so Quentin did this thing during his tear when he qualified for those Pro Tours, where he would write down, like, take notes after every game of MTGO or every match. And this is something that when I have time, do a lot of too. I think I'm gonna start doing it again, to kind of identify my weaknesses, and I'll let you know how it goes, Matt.
Okay.
So
I will probably do the same.
cool. I would love to share notes. Next question is, going into a new standard format, do you look at how the mana looks, then the cards you want to try out, and existing ideas, or do you just play with the new cards in general and see how they play out? As the resident brewer on this show, I try literally everything that looks fun. But like, I don't need to play games to see if mana works. Like, you don't really need to do that. And fun fact, I was going to do this on another show, but I'll just give it to you now. So, if we just look at the shock duels, I can give you a shortcut to the decks that you should be trying. So, crap, where's that group? This group. So, Naya, the supported shards and wedges are Naya, Abzan, Grixis, Jeskai, and Sultai. Naya has no green, is missing a green-red land. Abzan is missing a black-white land. Grixis is missing a black-red land. Jeskai is missing a blue-white land, and Sultai is missing a blue-green land. The base colors for each are blue for Grixis, red for Jeskai, black for Sultai, green for Abzan, and white for Naya. So, with that being said, depending on the type of cards I want to play, that mana will dictate that. But I don't need to play games to know if the mana is possible. What I will need to do is tweak the mana afterwards and understand the number of sources that I want. So the mana versus the cards is not the question, because I just won't try things that I know won't work.
Yeah, I think that's true with mana, especially. Like, if you look at your mana base and it looks sketchy, it's probably sketchy.
Yeah, so
right?
For example,
like, if you just look at it and you're like, I can't imagine this working.
So, for example, I'm just not
I
going
mean,
to try Jund.
That's most of the time true, right? But like, I mean, if we looked at the 4-color vehicles deck that they played at that Pro Tour, like where it was like 12 fast lands or whatever, and you're like, there's no way this mana works, right? He's playing 3 different colors of fast
mana
lands.
Looked good. They weren't trying to play.
You thought the Concealed Courtyard's Fireball Canal mana base looked good?
I mean, they were only playing one blue card, right?
Cost any mana.
What's that?
That mana for that deck looked fine. They were playing a bunch of
they were only playing one blue card in the whole deck, and like they were just replacing basics with the Concealed Courtyard. Or with
Did you play the deck?
Yeah.
Yeah, the mana was fine in that.
I played a lot of matches of Magic with that deck, and basically the only hands where you were like casting the spells that you were trying to cast were the games when you had Concealed Courtyard and Spirebluff Canal. Basically, every other hand was going to have to like be on a mulligan, which is fine. I mean, sometimes you just can't cast one of the spells, and that's fine. But like that was definitely something that was happening.
Okay.
Sure. I mean, I think that was a pretty good deck in that format. But, all I would say is, if you look at something and you're like, this mana can't work, you're probably right.
Yeah. So for example, I'm not going to be trying to build Jund decks, right? Because it's like I don't like what am I going to I'm going to play like an ETB just straight up tap lands like. I'm gonna get crushed by people playing multiple shock lands and check lands. Like it's not even gonna be close. Like I'm just gonna get ran over.
So that's one answer. The other answer is that you can mostly, a lot of the time, like brewing is fun, but for like relatively high level play, I would mostly let other people build constructed decks, and I would rather rely on people smarter than me to build the deck I'm going to play.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't do a lot of brewing on a macro scale. I mean, I find myself to be a lot better at the tuning portion of the game. I'm able to like identify which cards I want to play,
Sure.
but not necessarily archetypes.
Say everyone is the same level.
For what that's worth.
Sorry, I thought you were done.
No, I just said for what that's worth. I was done. Yeah.
Say everyone is on the same level and two people are playing, and one person is birding. When a person makes a play, you don't think is optimal, do you stop them and ask them why, or do you wait until after the game is finished? So I think that we just like if we're playing with playtesting with three people, we all stop each other to like talk about plays all the time. Like it's not even a question.
Yeah, I think that if you ask somebody a question about a play they made in the beginning of the game, at the end, the actual reason is going to be so far gone a lot of the times that you're not going to get anything valuable out of it.
Yeah, I think that like.
Agreed.
I think that if somebody's like interrupting, like specifically in playtesting, like you absolutely should just be like, "Hey, can we like talk about this line instead? Because this is what I would have done," and then just discuss it. Because it's like way more valuable than like, "Hey, so like on turn 4 of this 16-turn game, you did this. Like, can we talk about it?" And they'll be like, "Yeah, sure." Like,
yeah, I don't even remember that. Yeah. Definitely. And honestly, it's not like you're going to ruin a game by informing them. Like, I assume that the reason that this question is a question is because you don't want to like give away information of somebody's hand. But that's mostly fine. I don't think that's actually an issue in playtesting.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, I'm mostly happy to basically play games face up.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, if you're playing with two people, I think a lot of the time, like basically saying like I can do this or this, what makes sense to you and why. A lot of the time, when your opponent has cards in their hand, they can give you better information about what they're thinking based on what they've seen out of your deck than like you can give thinking about what you would be thinking in their perspective, because the knowledge that you already have kind of clouds it sometimes.
One of my really early weaknesses in Magic is that in playtesting, I was just trying to crush my friends. Like that was my whole goal. And I got really good at just crushing my friends because I could read them. Matt talked about how that was one of my skills in Magic. And like it was so counterproductive to getting better. Like it wasn't even like helpful in any way, shape, or form. And so often people look at playtesting as like figuring out like how to crush their opponent, and that's just not productive. Go play a bunch of leagues on Magic Online and try and crush people, but like human interaction, the way that you have it in playtesting is like valuable. And you are wasting an opportunity that you have that you don't typically get by not optimizing the fact that you, another person, are playing against each other with a friend watching, and you guys can communicate with each other openly and honestly. Like it's very helpful, and it should be utilized, not looked down upon.
Yeah, I think that basically just like playtesting with ego is not
just bad. It's just bad.
It just doesn't do anything.
How do you approach deck design testing for a team event versus a single event? Well, you tell Spencer he's playing a deck, and then you switch it on him a week later, and then I assume tomorrow they'll switch it on me again.
Easy.
That's very much not true. So the way that we've
Just
actually
kid-
approached this
I'm
one
just
completely
kidding.
has been Spencer said on this deck, so let's pick the 2 decks that go with that. 'Cause we
Whoa!
know that Michael and I. Here's the thing: Michael and I know we're gonna flip flop 100 times. So
I
like,
literally gave you guys a
it
list of
makes
like,
sense.
I'm like, I'll play any of these. Like, just tell me which one I should play.
Yeah, I know, but you
And if
needed
you
an
told
answer
me-
3 weeks ago.
But if you told me tomorrow I was playing a different deck, I would play a different deck.
Fair enough.
Am I actually a hindrance in the process? Because if I am, I'll adjust. I'll just play 30 different decks this week.
No. Certainly, I wasn't trying to imply that. You're actually the only helpful part of this process. I don't know that I would ever be able to decide what to play if it wasn't for you having a deck already played or ready to
Yeah,
play.
I think trying to find some constraints. I would say that the biggest thing that like happens in unified team formats, you're just working with some constraints. So I actually think that setting sort of one of the constraints early and then trying to figure out what makes sense given that constraint is a little bit easier sometimes than trying to look at every possible like 3-deck combination. Right? Like there are just less combinations if you set one of them already.
Right.
Or even
Unfortunately,
2
I
of
don't
them,
know that
right?
that was true with either of the decks that we picked for me, right? So like the first deck that you guys said was Infect, and like Infect doesn't share like any cards with anything. And the second deck was Blue White. That
Nobles.
deck sure Nobles, yes. And then
I mean, it's Nobles and
Nobles,
Beanpot,
Path, and
right, I'm saying
and
that
then Path.
I'm saying
Those
that
both are actually really restrictive.
okay, that's fair.
They eliminate big chunks of the other decks you can play, and I think that
Yeah.
that's like what you're trying to do. What I would say is try to find things that allow people to play to their strengths if you're working on unified formats. And my inclination is generally to play decks that are like slightly less powerful but more in your wheelhouse if that's what it comes to. I think that trying to force people into playing decks they're not good at doesn't usually go well.
and I think the other thing is like just like have some amount of trust. I think that like uh so this works both ways. So like when you ask for an opinion, like let's say that you're doing Team Uniform out of like when I give a deck list and my thoughts for let's say Blue Eye Control, which is what I'm on right now, to these two, I expect honest, constructive criticism, not like don't ignore the fact that I'm asking for input. Like this is a team environment, but also like on the flip side, you know, the team needs to value the thing that you're feeling about the deck because, like, kind of like Michael said so many times, is your feelings are probably more often right, and you should trust them. And the same is true as everybody. Like, take the fact that there are 3 of you working on something together and apply that. Matt, any thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I would say that at the end of the day, it's going to be the person playing the deck who has the final say, but they should definitely be taking advice from their teammates as far as, you know, deck design or anything like that. The other big thing about team events specifically, especially team unified events, I would try to avoid doing things like, oh, we can play these decks together, but one of them is going to be slightly less optimal. Like at one point we were toying with the idea of playing humans and ad nauseum, and then Michael realized that they both play Seachrome Coast, and he was like, "Cool, can we work one of them without it?" And I just like mostly put the shutdown on that one right off the bat because we've gone down that rabbit hole before, and like if it's not something pretty small, like it's actually kind of a disaster.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people actually do this at the Team Unified Standard RPTQ, where like they're like, oh, you know, like we lost one of our win conditions to the other deck, or like we lost like this dual land, but like we just played this, and I was like, what? Why would you do that? Your deck is worse every time you draw the other card.
This is way more true too in Modern than in Standard. Like in Modern, there are a lot of good decks that don't share any cards, so pick ones that are good.
Right.
Like you don't want to be.
Yeah, there's just no
playing,
reason to do that to yourself.
There's no reason to play like Gimpy ad nauseum, right?
So-
or like Bad Mana, right? Like you shouldn't do either of those things.
And I think that like if you're looking at like team constructed events, right, where like one person's on Legacy, one person's on Modern, and one person's on Standard, I honestly think that you should just treat that as though like you should let everybody be in their lanes and like ask for feedback, but like the person kind of like Matt said, like you're in your lane, like If you think that Blue White's the best deck for this event, play Blue White. If you think that Grixis is the best deck for this event, play Grixis. But obviously, talk to your friends and don't let them be just completely insane. But also it's it is not worth it to force somebody into something when they will probably just do better doing the thing that they want to be doing.
Is this a good time to bring up the fact that I might play Mono Black Devotion on our team for this?
I
GP?
will put the kibosh on that one. Awesome. So
No
that's
trust,
it from
Spencer.
what?
No trust, Spencer.
I did. Is Deathrite Shaman legal again?
It is not.
They might let him play it if he plays Mono Black Devotion.
Oh, man.
Be like, yeah, this is a fair trade.
Okay.
I put my Pack Rat and my Thoughtseize both on turn 2.
Yeah. Get it, Matt Kling? I don't think that deck plays Pack Rat.
Mono Black Devotion?
Does it play Pack Rat in Modern?
I don't know. Mine
Isn't
does.
I don't
Isn't
think
it like
Mono
a
Black
Gristlebrand deck?
Not even like a deck.
Well, thank you so much to our patrons. You can go to patreon.com/ccmtg and be a part of these type of episodes. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed those questions. I'm excited to do more around some of the stuff that we talked about. It was funny. I told Mason this. Mason, I don't remember what we were talking about. Oh, we were talking about other podcasts, and I talked about why I didn't like a specific podcast. This podcast is actual crap. This is one of the worst Magic podcasts. He's like, well, why do you think that? I'm like, because this person's doing this instead of this, and if they just did it this way, the podcast would be great. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a better podcast host because I just realized something that I do poorly on the show, and I hope to improve it. And I hope I did a little bit of that this week, and I hope to be even better at next week. But I hope that I can do a better job of helping my co-hosts play to their strengths, and I can play to my own strength a little bit better. And our listeners actually asked some questions that played to lots of the strengths on this cast. So thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. It's always interesting to get to answer questions, and it's interesting to think about what other people are thinking about, right?
Yeah.
Just sometimes don't consider things until you get asked it.
So with that being said, thank you everybody for listening. Don't forget to check out our sponsors, both at Ink Gaming and Oasis Games, and don't forget to check out Patreon. We'll see you guys all next week.
Take it easy.
See you when we're Grand Prix champions.
Oh man, I'm just gonna.
Magic, 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 magic.